So CBR.com put out this article, and before I get into what the article's about, I'm gonna give B Walt and everybody, those eight strong ass supportive followers we got. B Walt, did you play Street Fighter 2?
Of course.
Okay. Did you play Street Fighter 3?
When I was doing laundry at the laundromat and I was waiting for my shit, but I didn't really like it that much.
Right. And so the article goes about how Street Fighter 3 nearly killed Capcom. And I had a problem with the article because of that, the way they prefaced everything. It wasn't Street Fighter 3's fault, in my opinion. And please interject whenever you feel like. But because you got to understand, Street Fighter 3, specifically Third Strike, is one of my favorite games of all time. It's top 3 for one of my fighting games as well. I put it probably right outside Virtua Fighter. But the way Street Fighter 3 for me was the first time we saw sort of chinks in the armor when it came to Capcom. This is what Capcom used to do, and what they still do with just about everything that isn't Resident Evil, and even that they're starting to fuck up or being inconsistent with. They've been out inconsistent with throughout the years. They're good at making a presentation with the characters and the style and all this like shit that you notice immediately, and then they've got these like good fundamentals in terms of making a fighting game because they've done it so many times. They've got their own language. Most of these games work off the 6-button style and the concept that they built with Street Fighter 2. But none of their games, their problem is they make these invisible sandwiches. They don't have any meaning in them. There's no story. There's no characters. There's nothing that really connects you from one to the other. And I remember when Street Fighter 3 finally came out 7 years after 2, it was like, who the fuck are these guys that Ken and Ryu were fighting with? Why are they here? What happened to Chun-Li? What happened to Guile? What happened with Bison? None of that got answered. So you had a bunch of these like yahoos showing up that kind of felt similar but were really different with Ken and Ryu. And so you talk about the time that they took to make this game on some Spawn shit, seven fucking years. The climate of where the arcades were at that time, because remember, there was Street Fighter 3, but there was also Street Fighter Alpha. There was a Marvel vs. Capcom. There was a Darkstalkers. All these other fighting games. Street Fighter 3 was essentially competing against itself in other Capcom games. And what are you doing? What are you doing?
I'm holding the mic down for you. That's the boom mic, so you can get it all in. Continue.
So my point is, they didn't have a story. It took too long to come out. There was the internet, what it isn't what it was now as opposed to back then. So you didn't have any information. So that's Capcom almost killed themselves with the way they presented this game. So I say all that to say, if you ain't played Third Strike by now, you should. It's technically one of the best fighting games you'll play, especially a 2D. The art is legacy. It's classic. It'll always transcend because the amount of frames and that animation, it still has never been done to that level since. And if Capcom wants to get around this issue, they need to figure out what the problem is. So, for instance, Ken and Ryu, Ken had a son in that game. They've had 4 games since then. We've never seen his son since. Never seen his son since. His son beat his ass in the ending, and he's got lightning powers as opposed to his flame abilities. Never seen him since, bro. Never seen him since. Ken had an understudy, black dude named Sean. Where the fuck is Sean? Sean had hands in the first 2 games. We haven't seen him since. This is Capcom is the only problem.
Sean is in jail.
Well, then have him show up with Cody, who was in jail, and had him break the fuck out and beat up niggas. That's fine. That's fine. But tell me a goddamn story. Like that's been their issue. So I saw this article and I saw it as an opportunity to rant about one of my favorite games. So don't blame Street Fighter 3. Blame the daddy. If you want to be there, he need to be there. That's all there is to it. Your thoughts, P. Walt?
I never. I played all the Street Fighters, but they never really stuck with me like this. Street Fighter 2, Turbo was probably my favorite. The idea of any particular game destroying Capcom is a little bit hard to believe. I would say it's more so, like you said, not the development of compelling. Well, I mean, the characters are cool, I guess, but a compelling story to keep people coming back to that particular franchise. Because I do remember that. Like, I mean, it went from Street Fighter, the first Street Fighter, which was just stupid ass. Like, this shit was terrible, but when it came out, it was cool at the time. Street Fighter 2 was like, okay, well, at least you know this nigga's from Japan, this nigga trained with him, he's from America, you know. So there was little bits and pieces of their story, and then you kind of got pieces of it at the end. Remember the endings? Like, oh, Sagat got beef with Ryu because Ryu gave him this motherfucking scar on his chest in the battle. You know, these are little things. So they gave him crumbs.
Slapped him up. Yeah.
Right. They gave him crumbs. And then you go to the next one, and they got the Bruce Lee character in there. They got DJ. You know, you don't really know why they're involved. So the issue is, it's just storytelling. It's just not good storytelling. But you got to remember when Street Fighter first came out, it was just an arcade machine during the earlier age of arcade machines. So niggas didn't really care about that shit. Like think about basically their issue is not moving with the times. Once you come over to the consoles and shit, and the game is more accessible to these people, they're gonna be playing it more often. Then you need more to keep somebody involved. So I think of arcade games like Bad Dudes. I don't know if you remember that shit.
Yeah, I remember Bad Dudes.
Well, a lot of people don't because it didn't really have a story. It was two niggas in black tank tops. They was mad at some guy, and so they, you know, for 6 boards, they just walking across hitting niggas till they get to the end. And I think they needed to save the president's daughter. Like, it was very like, but arcade games at the time, earlier, you know, in our time frame when we was coming up, they didn't really have strong stories. One, because they were trying to maximize how much money they made.
The quarter. Yeah.
Right. They're trying to maximize, you know, we're gonna make this shit hard enough so these kids throw their dollars in, they never gonna fucking win. And then the next kids are gonna come. So we, you know, who cares about a story? Nobody's gonna get further enough in the game to care about the story. They just, you know, losing that $20 a week their parents getting for lunch or whatever. So, I mean, I get it, but once you transition over to consoles, yeah, you need to kind of make it a little bit more substantial. I think once you get to Street Fighter 4, you know, the latest one they have, or 5, I think maybe is the latest one.
They're on 5 now.
It's still kind of the same thing. Like, the story is not that.
It hasn't been pushed forward at all.
That's not that fleshed out.
And that's the point that I'm making. Like, there was no justification as if why are these characters here with Ken and Ryu? The hardware that they were using for Street Fighter 3 was completely different than all the other software that they had been using. Excuse me, the software that they had been using for the other fighting games. And like, you didn't know that these characters from a structural standpoint were combinations of Street Fighter 2 characters. That information didn't get brought up or presented to us. That was like damn near that was like 2004, 2005 at that point. Third Strike had been out almost 4 years at that point. The third iteration of that game. Well, so,
you know, you're coming from a position of a gamer, right? You're coming from a position of a gamer, someone who invests their time into getting good at a game, learning the game, following the game. They're coming from a position of a corporation,
a formulaic,
formulaic, right? If this shit has been working and we're not seeing any tests that this shit is getting any weaker for our sales, matter of fact, our sales are going up. What the fuck? Why would we change the formula? You know what I'm saying? That's why I
Yeah,
commend. That's why I commend those Mortal Kombat cats. Because the first couple of Mortal Kombat didn't really have no story either. But then once they got to like 9, 10, 11, they were like, okay, let's really try to flesh this shit out. Um, you know, because I think they understood that it was like, well, you got to have something else other than the nigga flying back and forth shooting lightning out of his hands. It looks like a ripoff of a character from Big Trouble in Little China.
because it is.
As he is, which is fine, you know.
But that only lasts for so long.
Right, put a little bit of effort in. But if you would you come on, would you change the formula if you don't have to?
That's okay. No, I wouldn't. But it was. But Capcom hasn't. They haven't figured this out yet. Is what my point is. Like we're talking about some shit that happened over 20 years ago, and we're now probably three. You count all the different variations and iterations of the numbers that they're on in terms of the Street Fighter. You're talking like 6 or 7 different versions, and we're still having the same conversation about shit.
I would be interested to see what their sales are though. Are they still going up?
No, they're not. No, Capcom got really good at making like showing you shit that was really dope, and then having this game, and then they do a couple installments of this game, and then they would just never come back to that franchise. Rival Schools, Darkstalkers, Street Fighter for a long ass time, Onimusha. What else? There were games on the previous era back before we got to 32-bit with the Sony PlayStation. Like they're just notorious for that. And like I know they've had issues and major stuff because of the natural logistics they were dealing with. Japan's had some real serious earthquakes over the years that like literally tore their cities apart. Where Capcom was where they were at that point, and that's affected things and things like that. And I know everybody's been affected by the pandemic, but this is prior to that. They even with Resident Evil, they've taken steps back from Resident Evil 4, which we both know doesn't quite hold up like it used to. But at that time, it was leading the era. It was leading survival horror after kind of giving that crown up. They just sit there. Capcom is like a living version of Konami. They have all these great IPs that they just sit on and don't do shit with. Konami just said, fuck it, we're just gonna be out. Like, we don't even do this shit no more. Capcom does shit, but they don't do shit with their own IPs. That's been my problem with them. So yeah, because I got fucked over in a Capcom game once. I'm not even gonna go into that. They fucking the what Marvel vs. Capcom 3 comes out. I get the special edition with the DLC, and it's like $89. And bro, it's got everything, or it says it's got everything. Not a year later, not 6 months later, they bring out a better version of the game with specific characters just to that game that I can't get on the game that I paid almost $100 for half the price. Half the price. And it wasn't like it was an add-on to what I had. I had to go buy a whole new copy of this game if I wanted that content. A whole new copy. I said, fuck Capcom for that. And I'm still saying fuck Capcom for that. Pieces of shit. So
fuck Capcom for that.
Yeah. They just mishandled like 7 different franchises, but I digress.